This conference will now be recorded.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, great. So yesterday we talked about test process and the pyramid and the percentage of the stages, right? Various states of testing like unit testing, API, end to end. So we try to understand that how to solutionize our approach strategy for test automation or any kind of functional testing is something which we can go by this test pyramid, right? So this is something which we tried to understand yesterday. So now for today, so let's talk about Selenium, right? So okay, so what is the history of Selenium? So from where it came? What was the requirement, basic requirement that has set up this Selenium, right? That has you know uh, what we say, like that has invented this Selenium, right? The reason. So there was some company called ThoughtWorks. Anyone heard about it? ThoughtWorks? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, and we have never heard of
Okay,
this company.
okay, okay, great. Okay, so this is the company, okay, so which has come up with the concept of Selenium, okay. So they have somewhere down the line in 1960s, I guess, or not 60s, maybe 1980s. So what this company did is they had a requirement of completing or doing some repetitive tasks. So they wanted to achieve some automation such that all these repetitive tasks can be handled through automation. So this is where this company has come up with the concept of Selenium. Clear on this part? So now when they came up with this, right? They came up with this Selenium. So initially they do not have this WebDriver, right? It's not a WebDriver. Initially it is not a WebDriver. Okay. So right now we use Selenium WebDriver, right? So many people might have heard like people saying it as Selenium WebDriver,
Yes.
correct? So it was not a WebDriver initially. Okay. So what was that? It was just a installable library. Okay. And uh, what I could say is they have come up with Selenium IDE. Okay. So let me draw down that diagram such that you people would understand initially how this Selenium has emerged and evolved, right? So let's call it as Selenium suite. Now this suite initially they have come up with Selenium IDE, right? So initially they came up with Selenium IDE where we only can run web automation, right? No other uh, kinds of automation that it would support. It's just about record and playback, right? You record your steps and then play in the IDE. That's all. So that is something which they have come up with initially. And then they went on to Selenium RC. What is the Selenium RC? Any idea?
Not sure.
Okay. So Selenium RC. RC means remote control. It's a bit of, evolving from the Selenium IDE, where Selenium IDE initially, it's like a plugin, right? A plugin that you can install on Firefox browser. So default, they have worked on Firefox browser, right? So this IDE is a plugin for Firefox. So people used to add it as an extension, right, in the Firefox, and then they used to start, recording their screens, and then again rerun that, right? That is something which we were doing in Selenium IDE. Now what happened? Later on, they thought, okay, so right now people are recording and playing it back just in the local, right? Their local machines, in the local what we say like setup, right? In the local setup, in the local browser, they were doing it. So instead of that, they have come up with a new approach where it is a Selenium remote control, right? That is a tool uh, which again users use to automate the web browsers, right? Using server based approach. Till now there is no server based approach, right? So we just install that plugin on the browser, Firefox browser, and then we start recording and playing it back in locally. But there is no such mechanism like server based, right? Now it is a client and server based. So what they did, they have come up with this Selenium RC. So remotely they would connect to some server, server, and then trigger their execution, right? This particular tool, Selenium RC, is the primary tool with the versioning Selenium 1.0. How it worked? So this Selenium server that we are talking about, it is a Java based server. So initially in the olden days or initial days, so Selenium is something which was born on Java, right? It was bound to work on Java. So Selenium server is a Java based server that received the commands from the test scripts. So this particular server, whatever we would have, a Java based server that would receive the commands from the test scripts, right? So if I want to execute the test script, so I would provide some command, and that this server would understand, and then it would work as per the action that I have proposed, right? That's how it was. So now what it has the setup of this Java based Selenium server, and then the client libraries. What are these client libraries? Nothing but your methods, right? Using which you would interact with the server. And it has got something like client libraries with Java, Python, and Ruby initially, right? All these languages that can send the commands. So this, by using these client libraries, so we can send the commands to the server. Commands would be sent to the server. So you would also have another component, that is your browser configuration, right? So these are the three components that we have in Selenium RC. So you have a server, you have a client libraries, and you have the browser configuration. So now when it comes to Selenium RC, why we required this browser configuration? So initially we discussed that this is a plug and play, what is that? the Selenium IDE. So it is a plug and play, and it worked for Firefox, right? Initially they have come up with an extension which works on Firefox. Now what they did, they identified that it is not just Firefox. So people use multiple other browsers as well. So that's where they have given this feature of configuring the browsers as well. So the server would be able to launch and control the browsers according to the scripts, the client libraries with which we connect, right? Or provide our what is that commands, right? So now this browser configuration, so the server launch and the control of the browsers according to these instructions, and it supports multiple browsers, not just a single browser, right? So it supports, at that time we had Internet Explorer, right? Firefox and Chrome as well. Okay, all these three major, you know, browsers which were prominently used in market, so they started supporting them. Clear on this part? Any questions still here?
No.
No? Okay. So we had Selenium ID initially, and then we moved to Selenium RC, and from there again we moved to WebDriver. Now came the WebDriver, right? Till now there is no concept of WebDriver. So now we came to Selenium WebDriver. So what is this WebDriver? Selenium WebDriver does. Before going to this Selenium WebDriver, let's talk about why we have moved from Selenium RC to the Selenium WebDriver, right? That also we probably need to understand when we are trying to understand this history, right? So what happened? This server setup, right? Whatever Java based server, this first component. So the setup is very complex. People felt it is very complex setup because it has a separate process altogether to set up a Java based server, right? And also there are, because it is a server based, so let's say like you have when more number of people accessing a application, so what happens? Let's take the IRCTC. When the people started initially using this IRCTC to book the tickets, and especially when booking the Tatkal quota in the IRCTC app, so we used to face lots of issues, right? Like people you try to log in a specific time frame where we are authorized to book the tickets, maybe like from morning 8 to 9, let's say. So in that 1 hour, many people used to log into the system, and for most of them they were not able to log into the system itself, right? They were not able to log into the system, access the application. In the similar stuff here, so when it is a server based mechanism, right, they never anticipated that there would be lots of people who would be using this, right, being a open source, right? So now they started seeing performance issues. So what kind of performance issues? So in order to trigger your execution, your test scripts, right, it is bit slow. Not just bit slow, it is much slower when compared to even executing through the IDE locally. So that is much faster. And this one, sometimes it connects to the server, sometimes it may not connect to the server, right? Based upon that availability and other stuff. So they faced lots of issues. Like the setting up of the server itself is a complex thing. And again, your scripts, if you have lots of scripts to run again, so it's very slower. And then the support as well. So support is very limited at that time. So it was very limited because they just formed the community, right? So the support is also minimal. Because of these factors, I guess they moved on to Selenium WebDriver. Okay, so when they came with Selenium WebDriver is in 2011. So RC is totally replaced by WebDriver, right? So now in order to interact with a browser, let's say I have a browser and I'm saying this as Firefox or Chrome, whichever it is. Okay, so in RC you would have a server and you are the client for the server, right? Your machine where you have the scripts. So this client library, you used this client libraries here and then you invoked to the server stating that okay, open the Chrome browser. So your server is the middleware, right, for you. Like it takes the request from you, it processes it, and then it invokes the browser for you, right? It is a bit lengthy process. So as we discussed that it is a much slower to execute. That's just because we provide some command and that command need to be processed at the server level and then again it get back to you with the action that it need to perform. So that's something which was weird and little slow as well. That's where they then moved on to Selenium WebDriver, which is a more efficient, direct way to interact with the browsers. So we will discuss how the interaction happens by using Selenium WebDriver, okay, shortly. So interacting with the browsers was more efficient in the WebDriver. So making it the better choice for the modern web testing, right, and the automation. So right now from 2011, so we are on Selenium WebDriver. Now when it comes to Selenium WebDriver, right? Sorry. So when it comes to Selenium WebDriver, it's a programming interface. Now you don't have something like some server and the client libraries. You need to install that and again you utilize those commands. This and the entire lengthy process is not there. It's just a simple jar file, right? It is developed on Java, right? As we discussed, Selenium itself is developed on Java. It's a Java based. So they have come up with some WebDriver mechanism where you would have a jar. You can just download it, plug and play for us, right? So what is that? It has this direct interaction to the web browser, eliminating the need of that separate server, Java based server. So now it is not required. This is not required. When you download this WebDriver, a jar file, so it's just a plug and play for us. And you would anyway have those, interface. This WebDriver interface would provide you all the, this is an interface, right? We will discuss in the, um, what is that? In the upcoming classes where we discuss on OOPS concepts, the basics of C#. So we would go through it. What is this interface? We would try to understand that why an interface is very much required and how we use interfaces in our day-to-day activities as well, right? So now Selenium WebDriver is an interface and then it has the methods. We just utilize those methods and it's a plug and play for us. No need of this entire setup, correct? Which is there in the RC. Now it is not required. They removed these dependencies and other stuff, right? It's a very simple thing. So now let's see how this uh, driver works, right? We will see the architecture of this driver. Any queries till now? Yes? No?
Nope.
Okay, fine. So we all know that Selenium works on multiple languages, right? So now let's talk about that WebDriver architecture, where this would be your code, okay, or the test scripts. So how are these scripts? These scripts are in multiple languages, be it Java, Ruby, Python, or JavaScript as well, right? It can be any. So it supports multiple languages. So it has the language binding with Java, Ruby, Python, and JavaScript. So any language you can use. Oh, we missed C sharp. How come? Okay. So Java, Ruby, Python, C sharp, and JavaScript. Now what happens when you try to execute your commands, right? Or your test script? So you have something called as JSON wire protocol, using which it interacts, you know, onto your server. Okay, you would have a HTTP server. It's a HTTP over HTTP server. So you would have a HTTP server where your browser drivers are there. Browser drivers and the real browsers, both are available here. What are these browser drivers? So browser drivers are the drivers, or again, the interfaces that we use in order to invoke those browsers, right? So the real browsers would also be available, such that when you try to invoke, let's say like I have a Firefox driver, so I use Firefox driver commands at my code and invoke it. So now how this particular script would understand, so when I used this Firefox driver in my code to invoke it, so it is a specific command that we would have, right? So that command I have used in my code. Now what happens through the JSON wire protocol, it interacts with the HTTP server. So your calls are HTTP, okay? All calls which are being made or interacting with the WebDriver server are HTTP. And now this browser driver, whichever you have, set up at your client side, and then started triggering it. So from there it would understand, okay, this particular person is using a Firefox driver, right? Because it is already defined at the server side. So they have Firefox, Chrome. So Firefox, Chrome, Safari. See how many browsers were there? Opera, and right now it is Edge, right? Microsoft Edge, or whatever new driver that, new browser we have. So they have come up with those driver setup. So driver setup is there already on the server, and the real browsers are also available on the server. So that's from where you would be able to invoke your each of these browsers. And within that browser, so you have your Selenium interface, right? Which WebDriver interface that you would use. So that itself would come up with Selenium related methods, right? So all these page interactions and all, you would be able to use those Selenium methods and then interact with the web page or browser, right? Your interaction is only with the browser when it comes to the web application. Clear on this part? Clear? Any questions? Yes? No? Why you people are so silent, man?
We're good.
So far so good? Clear on this part? Okay, great. So that's where now initially when we had this uh, Java is a boom. Probably everyone would know when Java uh, came into the market. So almost all the applications, all the old applications maybe which were running on some mainframe systems and all. So I mean, most of the applications they moved to Java, right? So because of that complexity that these mainframe systems had, or maybe any um, other systems that during that time, which we have. So Java has solved it. Even for the web-based applications, the development of the web-based applications, Java has solved the barrier, right? The challenges that in the real time the IT has faced, right? So it's a boom. So most of the applications, some lakhs and lakhs of applications moved on to Java because they have given that seamless, um I mean, development using the Java and there are certain other data analysis and other stuff also. They have embedded everything, so we can do whatnot everything with Java. Okay, so most of the applications they just um, went on to Java. So they encouraged Java very much. So wherein you might have seen even today, you might see that Java based applications are more in market, and even people with SDET experience, most of them they come from Java Selenium background, right? And there came the .NET architecture from Microsoft. This is from Sun Microsystems, and this is from the Microsoft. So they encourage to use this .NET. So .NET again, it supports C hash, ASP, and VB, right? So it has come up with its own architecture, the .NET framework, right? So what is the challenge that usually in Java we feel is everything, every package and each and every installable. So we need to identify them, find out them, pick them, install them, right? And then try the setup. In case if it is that setting up that entire executables, installables, so such kind of stuff, it is a bit difficult during that days where most of the people were working on Java Selenium, right? There were lots of packages, but people while trying to add them into their project, install those executables, and try to uh, you know what was that? Try to use them in the project. So it was setting up that initial setup was a bit chaotic when it comes to Java. So till the time when Maven came into picture, right? Till that time it was like hell with Java. But when it comes to .NET, so wherein they provide the platform. See, now .NET is an architecture, an architectural change that they have come up with. What is that? IDE, Visual Studio. This was from Microsoft, right? They provide the entire end-to-end solution for you. So when it is in Java, Java is the language that you use. That's all. So you need to identify which IDE you want to, whether it is Eclipse or what are the other IDEs? I forgot, man. So there are some other famous IDEs, right? So whether it could be Eclipse or any other IDE, so we need to identify it right from the IDE, right, till the packages that we want to utilize and every stuff. So what we need to do is we need to identify them, we need to set them into the project, load them into the project, and then further proceed with the test scripting. So that's a heavy lift. Okay, rather than I say like it is challenging, it is a heavy lift, and it obviously takes lots of time and effort to initially set up your project. So setting up this project, setting the standardization within the project is a bit tricky when it comes to Java Selenium till the time Maven was introduced, right? But when it comes to .NET, they have come up with the entire end-to-end framework. So your Visual Studio, which is provided by Microsoft, okay, and they have some inbuilt packages. Microsoft itself provides the packages, right? So it has inbuilt packages which are from Microsoft again. We will see what are those packages and how we install them during our installation procedure. Okay, no need to worry about it. And what else? What else we use? And the language, right? Again, language, it is also from the Microsoft. So it's entire package, right? And it is a seamless integration. It is a seamless integration on the .NET framework, right? So yeah, framework, .NET framework at least. I don't call test framework, but .NET framework. So it is also provided by Microsoft, right? Now, when they have encouraged the people to use this seamless integration, so people felt it is much easier compared to going with Java. And there are lots of applications that again moved from Java to .NET as well. And right now, if you see again, most of the people they call AI in testing, AI in development, right? The recent boom. It's all about the ease of use and the efforts that we save and the time it takes for us to get into that technology, right? That's all about it. So if you have more resources on .NET, obviously people tend to go with the .NET technology. If you have more people with Java, people would go with resources. We also need to evaluate that, right? How, I mean, with respect to the resources. So if the resources with the technical stack more inclined towards Java, people go with Java, right? Likewise. So now we have this .NET, which is provided by Microsoft, and it has this inbuilt everything: Visual Studio, its packages, its framework, its installation is much easier, setting up the project is much easier, right? And we have C Sharp, which is again an object-oriented programming, similar to Java. So whatever Java does, even C Sharp would do for us. So now people started moving or trending towards .NET framework. So there are lots of applications that work on .NET as well, right? Let me show you something. Just give me a moment. Oh my goodness. Just give me a moment. I just would like to show the analytics. Okay, let me share this information. Okay, if you see here, I guess there are somewhere around 18.5 million developers, right? There are about 18.5 million developers who work on .NET applications, right? And now, what are the applications within the .NET on which probably these people might be working? There could be desktop applications, web applications, gaming applications, IoT applications, and as well as the cloud applications, right? So they have got Azure as well, right? So .NET Cloud applications. So these many applications were there, and it's all entirely on the .NET, right? And if you ask, you may not say like this is a very less amount when you have almost 18.5 million developers, right, who work on .NET. So this is not at all a what I say like less amount. So there is huge requirement in the market even for the estates who have this C# background, right? Because most applications also run on .NET. Clear on this part? Clear with this? Shall I proceed further?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So now let's understand what are the major what we say like terminologies that we use. Something like web browser we often use, web driver, right? And web page, web elements, network tab, and then some other developer tools and tabs, right? We'll see those today. Okay. So let's talk about web browser. So web browser anyway you know already, like you people would be using it to access web pages. So any websites if we want to load, we need internet and as well as the browser, right? And we also talked about this one. So our web browser, web driver. Web driver works on HTTP. So you need internet for that, right? So that's obvious for us. And now when it comes to WebDriver, we also talked about it. WebDriver is an interface which would have lots of methods in it. So we will deep dive into it anyway in further classes. And the other one is the web page. So what is a web page? So let's see what is a web page. So if I have, okay, let me open this Amazon, right? Amazon.in. This is the URL that I have given, right, in the web browser. Now whatever is loaded here, which you could see here, look and feel like an entire setup which was loaded onto the browser. This is a web page, right? This is a web page. Now this web page is built using some HTML and other front-end scripting languages, right? When I go to this inspect, I right click here on the web page and click on inspect. So I would be able to see the elements that are used. This is all some HTML document, right? You can see here. This is a HTML document. Document type is HTML. Able to see it? Is it visible to the people?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is something like these components, whichever you see. Let's say something like this, the tabs that you have or the images that you have, right? Or some description like minimum 50% of blah 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 stuff, whatever it is, even these links whichever you see all offers, right? Any other links or images, every component is defined in this HTML document, right? In tags. So you would have a starting tag as HTML and then a header and a body. Body is where you would have again multiple components within it, right? Body holds the entire elements that were defined and being displayed here, right? Body would hold it. Okay. Now we wanted to understand. So what is that? Elements. What are the elements? So every component which is here are all elements. This particular text box which you see here, that is also an element. So what we call them? We call them as web elements because these are related to a web page, right? We are dealing with the website. So Amazon.in is a website. We loaded that website. So that web page has loaded. And now whatever components, like be it a text box or be it this drop down, right? Or be it the tabs, anything it can be. See, be it this drop down. It is in English. Maybe I can change my language as well, right? So there is a drop down. So even this one is a drop down. In the drop down again you have some options to select, right? So likewise, so all these are components which are called as web elements. So clear on this part, web elements part? Web elements are nothing but your components that are being displayed for the user interaction, and those are defined in the HTML document. I mean, that's how these elements are defined, right? Be it a button or any other components. So we will see what are these components, how many kinds of components are there, right? So what are those? Let's go here. Where is it? So I came up with one dummy HTML form, right? Where you can see and sense what are these components, right? So within this login page, so you could see here, I have text boxes, right? See here, correct now? And if you see this registration, it has text boxes and as well as a button. So these are the buttons. Buttons have only a single action, right? What is that action for the buttons? It's all about click. You click the buttons, right? It's the only user action that you can perform on the buttons. Agree on this with respect to buttons? And what are these text boxes? Text boxes or the edit boxes, right, are required to edit the data or add the data. User adds the data into it. Let's say my username. If I want to provide some username, so I can edit that field, right? It holds that value. When you edit it, you hold some value into it. That's all. So that is the edit box. That's one more component, right? So we have seen two components. One is the edit box. The other one is about the button. So button has that click, right? You click on the button. So that's the only action button has, not more than that, right? Now drop downs. We call these as drop downs because these drop downs hold multiple options and we can choose one among them, right? I can choose anything. It holds a set of values, more than one, and then I would have an option to select. But from a drop down, I can select only one option, right? I can only select one option. It only allows me to select one value out of all the values which it holds, right? Those are called drop downs. And then comes the check boxes, right? What are the check boxes? Have you ever seen check boxes in any of the web applications? Ever seen this? Anyone?
Yes, male, female.
Yeah, so somewhere in the registration probably they ask whether you're a male or a female. So when you define your sex, so that's where usually this checkboxes come into picture. So usually it may not be checkboxes for male, female, it would be radio buttons, because either you can be a male or a female or maybe some other category, but you have to select only one value, right? So that's where radio buttons would be used. So if I select this, I cannot select the other option. If I select this, I cannot select the first option. So these would be used for that, you know, um, male female component. So that is a radio button. Checkboxes are where if you want to select multiple values at a time, right? You would use checkboxes. See here, I'm able to click. This is again, the action is click, right? You're clicking on the checkbox so as to make it active or inactive, right? Selection and deselection, selection and deselection. But you would be able to select multiple values when you have checkbox. Clear on this? Clear on radio button and checkboxes? Any questions till now? So we have
Well,
seen edit boxes, buttons, what are the basic actions of those, and we also have seen drop downs, checkboxes and radio buttons. Do let me know if you have any questions here. I'll give a little pause. Shall I proceed further? Yeah, I can proceed, no?
yes, please.
Okay,
Yes, please.
great. Yeah. So now another component is table. So there is a component called table where you would have rows and columns, and all the data is defined within those rows and columns. This is just like your, if you compare this table, it would be similar to the columns and rows that we have in Excel, right? In the Excel worksheet, so in within the sheet, so you would have columns and rows, and you can just scribble the values row wise and column wise, right, in the cell. So in the similar way here as well, there is a concept of tables where they display the data in a tabular format, and then it also got similar structure. It is like rows and columns, and each um, what is that, each area where this value it holds is a cell again, right? So it forms a cell, so row wise and column wise, right? That's how these tables form. Okay, clear on this table on a high level? So you might see tables as well in some of the web applications, and we might require to deal with the tables. And these tables may not be like a constant table. Now, right now, if I refresh this also, it won't change, right? It won't change its place values. So name is the first column, age is the second column, city is the third column, and even the values as well. John, Mary, Mike, they don't interchange their, rows, right? They are still static. But at times, there could be situations where these tables are dynamic in nature, right? They generate the tables dynamically. There can be some additional columns added, or some of the existing columns for the first time when you have logged in, whichever you see, they may not be available when the second time you log in. It would be dynamic in nature, very dynamic in nature. So we need to handle such kind of scenarios as well. So we will see how we would do those in further sessions. Once we complete our Selenium WebDriver, so we would see these as well, right? And then links. Links, you probably might know it. So when you click on a link, it just goes to that particular, navigates to that particular URL, which is link, and if you click on this, so you would be able to navigate to that, right? Clear? See? Clear on the links? So links again has got the basic action, that is click, right? You just click on them. Nothing like you cannot edit it, you cannot do any other kind of uh, actions there, right? You cannot change anything. It's a read only thing. So you read that link, click on it, right? You access the link, click on it. You interact to it, you would click on this, such that you would navigate to the web page that is linked to that particular link, right? Clear? And then comes the frames. So what are these frames? So right now what I did, I created a frame, and within that I am loading example.com. So as it is not available, that site is not a proper one, so it is just showing up this, for me. Okay, so what is this space that you see here? This is called frame. This is a frame. Within the frame you can embed again certain data or a web page, anything, right? So these are called frames. So now how it would be, so some data these frames would hold, okay, it would display certain data. So the objects or the web elements, now by now you understand what is a web element, right? I will start using this web element here onwards. So the web elements, these are all web elements: edit boxes, buttons, drop downs, check boxes, radio buttons, table, links, frames, all these are web elements, right? So now what is this? So this would again inbuilt holds some other page. That means your objects related to this particular page are different and this particular page are different, right? For defining any web page, you would be going to again a HTML, right? So now the HTML file that holds the components, the right now whatever components I have, those are from form.html. Maybe this particular frame which is loading some other page for me, that itself means that this page and the components related to this particular page are so different and they are from some other HTML form, right? Clear on that part? Any questions on this regarding the frames? So frames can hold or display or embed some other, component, some other web page into it, right? Or some other components into it. So altogether, the components that currently you look and feel on the browser would be different, and the ones which you would have displayed in the frames would be different, right? Nowhere they are related. Clear on this part? It would be in such way. So we would also see how to handle those, right? So we'll talk about those. And then the dynamic content. What is that dynamic content? Probably I have, and then I would say like load content. So when I say load content, see, now I got dynamic content loaded. So some action that is dynamically being performed and displayed on the web page, right? So such kind of activities. So how to handle those, how to capture whether that particular dynamic load is happening or not, and decide whether that particular tests are executed successfully or not, is something which also we need to evaluate, right? This is also part of our testing. So let's see, even if I refresh this, see, I don't have any dynamic content currently loaded, but when I do this action of click on the button, this dynamic content is loaded, right? So now this is just a simple sample example where I have given some comments like dynamic content loaded, but in real time there could be some other actions that this particular click might do, right? So we need to see how we handle those. Maybe if I say load content, there is a new tab altogether where some new application would be loaded, right? That is also possible. It all depends on the requirements, how the client has come up with the requirements, how the product owners have set the requirements for us, how we have come out with our ideas to implement, and then based upon that, these kind of dynamic contents, dynamic in nature, they come into picture, right? So all these components are something which we would deal with in our day-to-day activities. Even if manually, let's say like login, what is that login functionality testing? It is about your username and password and then click on login, and to verify whether your welcome screen, whatever is defined or decided to be displayed, is displaying or not. Correct? That's the positive scenario, right? In the login mechanism. So what are the components involved there? It is two edit boxes. One is the username, the other one is the password, and then another action that is login or a sign in, right?
Button.
A click of a button, such that you would be able to enter into the application, navigate into the application, and access the welcome screen if you are a valid user with a valid password, right? Correct. So three different components are involved here. So one is the positive scenario where your validation checkpoint would be your welcome screen, and if at all it is like a wrong username you have used, a wrong password you have used, there could be some other flow for it, right? So what could be that flow? Probably user shouldn't be able to enter and access the application, and it has to throw some error. Now that error which it throws is a dynamic, let's say it is um, dynamically loaded onto the page whenever a user has given wrong username or password. And what it would say, it says an error stating that it is wrong user or password, please recheck and or please retry. Okay, that's the message that they are displaying. Now we need to evaluate that as well, no, that scenario as well. Correct? So all these validation checkpoints are something which we need to decide, right? What would be our validation checkpoints in each of these test cases? So manual test case might speak a lot. So they would have each step, and for each step they might have expected result, right? But for us, when we do this automation of that such kind of manual test cases, we also need to look into what are the important validation checks that we need to perform. Logically, we need to group them, right? Not every step would be considered for validation check from the manual test case. So what we need to do, we need to regroup it logically and see how feasible it is for us to automate it, right? And accordingly, we need to decide on the validation checkpoints and then automate the flow, right? Clear on this part?
Yeah.
Are we clear with the components that we have? Are we clear with the Selenium history
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
have seen today, right? So now this WebDriver is the one which has got lots of methods in it. It's an interface. So in the next class, we will discuss about this WebDriver a bit and see what are the methods that it has got, what are the classes that it has got. Uh, what are the methods that it has got, and as well as we would also see a small demo on installation part, right? So what are the tools that we use? We use Visual Studio. So we can use Visual Studio, uh, okay, community version, or we can also use this tool. There are lots of other tools. Are you able to see my screen? You're able to see, right? I'm accessing some. So this is also a Visual Studio. This is IDE, Visual Studio IDE, Visual Studio Code, right? That, right? Visual Studio Code. We can also use this tool, Visual Studio. So we can also use Visual Studio Code as well. Okay. But mind you, the setup would be much easy here, right? Though the installation might take lots of time, but I mean, installation of the tool might take a bit of time because of its size, right? But very easy here, right? And in the Visual Studio Code again, it's an IDE similar to our Eclipse. So by using this Visual Studio Code, also your Selenium C#. It's not, I mean, this particular Visual Studio Code is not specific IDE that works only for the .NET technologies. You can use this for even the front-end development, back-end development by using Java, Python, whatever language you want, right? And even for what we say, uh, Java development, right? Also one of the IDEs similar to Eclipse, right? But it is much lightweight tool. Visual Studio Code is a very lightweight tool and so fast and so easy here as well to set up. Okay, so there is Visual Studio Code and there is Visual Studio. Two tools which you can use. This Visual Studio is entirely of .NET. So either you can use ASP, C# or VB here. You cannot go with Java and other stuff here, right? Other languages probably in Visual Studio. So we would see with this, right? And later on, we will come back once we are confident enough in understanding this entire Visual Studio architecture and other stuff. I would then show you in the Visual Studio Code as well. Okay, clear on this part? So first we would proceed with this, try to understand our concepts. Once we build our framework and the setup into the GitHub as well, we will come back and we will try to understand how we can do with Visual Studio Code as well. Clear on this part? Everyone clear? Are the people there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll stop here. So in the next class, let's discuss on the WebDriver, the interface and the methods that it has got, and we would have the demo on installation as well. Okay. So we will do the installation of the tool. We would also do some initial setup, and then we would start working on our C# basics. Clear on this? Clear?
Yeah. What I was asking you,
Okay.
instead of, because Visual Studio it have a low capacity, that means .NET, ASP, and C#, and whereas Visual Studio Code has a lot of facilities, isn't it? So we can use
Uh,
all the languages in that one. So instead of using Visual Studio, we can use Visual Studio Code for this. So
You
it
can
will be
use it
easy.
absolutely. There is you can use Visual Studio Code as well. The only thing that I wanted to inform you is the
Okay.
initially, see, the only thing is we are now more focused on C# Selenium, right? For us, it is all about C# and Selenium. We may not be going with other languages as well here, right? For us, there is no much need as well. So it's up to us. If you want to go with Visual Studio Code and work with Visual Studio Code, I will start with that. And later on we come back and again we would see the Visual Studio as well. Why I say we need to understand both rather than having only one, setup, understanding only one single setup is in any of the projects, there could be teams which specifically based upon the client requirement, they might only use Visual Studio. And there are teams where they would use Visual Studio Code, right? So it's all up to the their perspective, even the developer's perspective. So they use any of these. So it is good for us to understand both. So one I would start with, and the second one I would take it up again. I mean, showcase you people how to use that. That's all. It's all about the way how we want to proceed with. So if you people like to proceed with Visual Studio Code, I would start with Visual Studio Code. And later on, I would showcase you the Visual Studio as well, because it is very much important for us to understand both the tools, right?
Yeah, that would be better, I think. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So it is for both the tools. I mean, we need to understand them and we need to proceed with both of them. What options they have, what packages we can install, and how we can drive our project. So how we can set up that folder structure, architecture, everything, right? Everything we need to look at Visual Studio level and as well as the Visual Studio Code level, right? Little bit difference would be there for both, so that we need to understand. That's all, such that you would be well versed with both the tools, because both are used prominently. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop here for today. Thank you for joining. So we will meet on Monday, right? So weekends there is no class, I guess. So
Or what?
we'll meet on Monday again.
There will be no